it says the meeting is coming up. That'll be with 15 seconds to go. And so then I'll tell you like 5 or something.
Okay.
I think we're about 10 seconds.
Okay.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Alachua County School Board Workshop of May 6th, 2020 at 2 p.m. This is a virtual meeting. This meeting is now called to order. The first item of business is a Cenergistic presentation. I believe Mr. Alex Rella will introduce our presenter on this. Mr. Rella.
Thank you, Chairman Roy. Before we jump into the presentation, I did want to give the board and the public just a little bit of background information on why we're here. The executive team meets every year, usually in the fall, in advance of the budget process, the budget building process. And we sit down and we think through different areas of the budget we could look at, different things we can do to reduce costs, to improve programs, as just kind of like a preliminary look at the budget and to give me some guidance going forward. One item we've looked at least for the last few years, at least the last 2 or 3 years, is our energy cost. And, you know, it's obviously one of the biggest line items in the budget. When we compare ourselves to other districts, we really feel like there's an opportunity there. I would like to commend Ms. Teresa Sperling-Wood on the work she's doing. I think she's done an amazing job over the years to kind of control those costs. And we've also, you know, part of the goal of this executive team is to look at cost reductions or cost avoidance that are as far away from the classroom as possible. Energy kind of fits that bill. And, you know, we've obviously had a lot of pressure on our operational budget over the years. And, you know, obviously, as we look at our current economic climate, it's certainly not going to get a lot better anytime soon. So we have met with a company, Cinergistic, which might sound familiar because the Alachua County just signed a contract with them, I think in January. But we've had an opportunity to meet with Steve and his team a few times over the last year, and most recently, I think in February perhaps, and, you know, really sat down with the executive team, superintendent, with Teresa Sperling-Wood, and had them walk us through the process of how their program works. Obviously, we're in the business at this point of saving every dime we can, as long as it's not going to impact the classroom. So with further ado, no further ado, I will turn it over to Steve, who's going to kind of walk you through the program that Cinergistics offers, and it can answer any questions. I know Steve's got some additional folks that there's some more technical questions about how this works.
Thank you, Mr. Rella.
Thank you, Alex. I found the unmute button. Madam Superintendent, members of the board, thank you for having us today. Before we get started, I'd like to say how much I do appreciate what you're doing with the, not only for the students and the parents and the community. I spent 26 years in public service in the city of Montgomery. I've talked to some of my colleagues on the mayor's cabinet over the last few days, and this is really a trying time. There's no playbook. I had one of the gentlemen tell me there's no playbook, there's no lessons learned. We're actually writing the playbook for history on how to handle this. So I want to thank you personally for what you're doing. It is always a daunting task to have to make decisions that sometimes are not the most popular, but thank you for what you're doing. I'm here today, like Alex said, we've met 2 or 3 times. We have signed a contract and entered into a partnership with Alachua County earlier this year. And Alex reached out to us and we've had some good conversations. So I'm going to introduce a couple gentlemen with me today. We're going to kind of go through at 10,000 feet what we do, how we do it, what the financial aspect of this is we're proposing looks like for the district, and then take any questions at the end that you may have or at any point during the presentation. So with me today, John Bernard. John's here. I can't see him, but John is our president of client development. John's been with the company about 26 years. So I don't think there's a question that can be asked that John will not be able to answer. And with John is Troy Williams. Troy Williams is a mechanical engineer. He was the chief operating officer at the city of Birmingham school district, has retired, left there and come to work with us, but he was a client of ours. He's been involved with the program, and he'll be very integral as if we move forward with Alachua County Schools as we move into this. My name's Steve Jones. I've been with the company about 3 years. I worked for the city of Montgomery for 26 years in various capacities, but the last 10 or 12 years I was in the mayor's office and was over operations. And one of the tasks was to find funding. And we looked at various ways and we saw that energy consumption was something that we could control. As with GRU as your provider in Montgomery, Alabama, Alabama Power is the only provider. We have no choice. So the rates that they charge were something we didn't have control of, but what we did have control of was how we used it and the amount that we used. So I'm going to share my screen now and go through a small presentation. I'm not going to belabor. I know your time is valuable. I'm going to put a PowerPoint up here. I can figure this out. Are you able to see that by chance?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Like I said, I'm going to go through this. Anytime that you have questions, please ask, and I'm going to keep it high level and move through this very quickly as I'm conscious of your time. Who are we? We were founded in 1986 by a gentleman named Dr. Bill Spears. Dr. Spears is still very involved with the company. He is the CEO. He is a hands-on type of gentleman, still very involved with the company and our prospects and how we move through this. We've been in the business for about 34, 35 years. We are a behavioral conservation and advisory service. I want to be very clear about one thing. We are not an equipment salesman company. We do not sell you equipment or any type of widget. We find the savings. We look for the anomalies and we find the savings through behavioral change within the organization. We are a funding source. We're a funding source for our partners. We provide those funds by returning the utility cost otherwise paid to the providers back to the district, and we do that through conservation and efficiency. One thing I'd like to say, and I've talked to Alex about this multiple times, and I talked to Ms. Lieberman with the county, we do not partner with everybody. We partner and we get into partnerships with organizations that are already doing something in the conservation world. We do our best work with people that are cognizant of conservation, of sustainability, and we embed ourselves with their program to take it to another level, and we actually advance what they're already doing. We capitalize on the good stuff, and what Teresa Spurgeon-Wood has done within the district is phenomenal. I've spent a lot of time on your website. She has done some amazing things. I'm going to talk about how I think that we can add to her bandwidth add to her bandwidth and take this to a different level. So I'm going to move forward now. This is who you are, and this is the data that I received from the district 5 or 6 months ago, so we could do some empirical studying on the district. Almost 30,000 students, 42 plus or minus buildings within the district. I think there's 36 actual education facilities and then other buildings, and almost 5.5 million square feet. I want to add to that 5.5 million square feet that Alachua County has almost 970 square miles within your district. It is a large district with schools spread out. I know that one of the districts, I think it's District 4 maybe, District 5, one of them is extremely large, I'm sure in the rural areas, but there's a lot of ground to cover within the district. And we feel like we're going to be able to add capacity and personnel to be able to touch all of those points in all 5 of your districts. Your spend is at the bottom, 8.7 million in total expenses with a cost per square foot of about $1.60. And I want to be clear about this. GRU is one of the highest, if not the highest rates in the state of Florida. And I talked earlier about, I have dealt with that in Alabama as well. You have no choice. We used to say it's either Alabama Power or candles. We would choose Alabama Power, but that's just, we understand we can do nothing about the rates, but we can do an awful lot about the consumption. And that's what we focus on. I'm going to talk just a little bit on this next slide about some of our regional partners. I mentioned Alachua County government is a partner of ours. We have a plethora of partners and clients within the state of Florida from north to south, but I wanted to highlight some of them that are in the central Florida, maybe Panhandle area, Marion County, Nassau County, St. John's, Wakulla, Walton. And if you look at their cost per square foot, we're having very good success with these districts in their cost per square foot. Again, to Teresa's credit, she has done a fabulous job of keeping you where you are with the rates that GRU is charging, because in Jacksonville, Florida, in Fort Walton, in Tallahassee, they've got different rates. But we still feel like that there is a lot of room that we can, with involving ourselves with the organization that she has put together, get this down to a much lower number. We want to take Alachua County schools, and we wouldn't be here if we didn't think we could. We want to get you off that trend of going up in kilowatt hours spent each year to coming down, and that equates to money. And I think that that's what we can do. We've had a lot of success in other areas. And to be quite frank with you, the city of Gainesville is a culture of sustainability, a culture of conservation. I found that very obvious talking to the county commission, that it is embedded in the culture of this area of Florida that not only are we good stewards of the taxpayer dollar, but we're good stewards of the environment. And I think when organizations realize that that is where we need to be going, that success is unlimited. Any questions about this so far, any of these numbers? Now I want to make a caveat that these numbers do not include water consumption. These come straight from the Department of Education submittals with their maintenance and operations report. So this is 2017-18. When I mentioned earlier that Alachua was $1.60 a square foot, it's $1.46 minus the water. The water is about 14 cents a square foot. You spend about $900,000 on water, but this gives kind of an apples comparison of some of what our clients are doing.
Question.
Yes, please.
It's $1.46 after $1.60. Is that the subtraction, or are you subtracting the 13 cents further?
Yes, sir. I'm saying that the 13 cents.
Talking about the water. He said it was $1.60.
Yes,
You said $1.46. Is that water already subtracted out, or you subtracted out again?
No, sir. The $1.60 includes water.
$1.46 is without it.
Yes, sir.
All right, okay. That's what we've been looking at. They're by far the highest in the state.
Yes, sir. And in the 2017-18 annual report that the DOE puts, Alachua County was the highest.
Unbelievable. I mean, the only one close was Vero Beach, and they went out of business, and Florida Power took them over.
Yeah, yes, sir. With $900,000 spent for water at 5.5 million, it's about 13%. And let me caveat onto that. We not only focus on electricity. Now, electricity is the lion's share of what you use, but we find egregious amounts of savings in the water consumption of districts. I was an athlete. I was a college athlete. I love athletics, but sometimes we need to rein in a little bit about how much we water a football field. I know that's not the most popular thing on the planet, but again, to get the satisfaction of the results we're looking for, sometimes we can do it with less expenditures.
I have a question, Mr. Jones.
Yes, ma'am.
This list of money per square foot for these districts that are listed on the page right now, is that before or after you're helping them?
No, that is currently, that is with us being with their program.
With your help. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Well,
It's
this,
about
go ahead. This is music to my ears, but go ahead.
we average about 24 to 25% reduction with our partners. St. John's has been a partner forever. And I'm sorry that I can't recall the gentleman's name that was the superintendent forever there that went to the college in St. Augustine. But they have had unbelievable success in St. John's. One that's not on here is Dr. Greco in Pinellas. Dr. Greco became partners with us when he was in Osceola 8 or so years ago, took the job in Pinellas, re-engaged with us. Dr. Greco was just given the Energy Star Partner of the Year Award for schools throughout the country by the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Energy with our program. So it is, we don't like to toot our own horn often, but we like to toot our horn every once in a while. Any more before I move on? Okay, this is what we feel like that we can do conservatively with Alachua County Public Schools. These numbers you're looking at are net return to the district on savings. You look at it, we start out at 600,000, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to move the everybody's picture. I think that final number is 4.5 million. Is that correct?
4.793.
4.7. Okay. We're looking at over the 5-year period. That is the net savings that we will put back into the district coffers at a very, very, very conservative 20%, hoping we can get more. I'll go over a little. I'm gonna go over a few things below that, but I want to say something that when I was a client of Cenergistic, when we engaged Cenergistic, my first question was, I would think in the first year that the savings would be much more than in the last year, because you're going to find all of these anomalies immediately. You've already found these. Ms. Sperling Wood has already found these low-hanging fruit that you have. She's got the LEED certification. She's got some of the Energy Star certifications for the board. What we're doing is we're finding these anomalies that you don't find unless you're in a building at 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. We're looking at time. We're going to be in your facilities after hours more than we are during hours. And you think, well, that's a really big number to find just excess energy used. Well, pragmatically, if you think about 5.5 million square feet and the amount of energy that's being, I don't want to use the word wasted because that's not the term I like, but that's being used that we don't need, it adds up very, very quickly. I talked about the Energy Star earlier, which is a phenomenal thing. Y'all have some Energy Star buildings. We want to add to that. Over 50% of all K-12 schools in the United States of America that have Energy Star certification are Cinergistic clients. It is a goal of ours. We like to celebrate successes that the district does, and we like to celebrate it outward. So we're looking at the numbers. What does this mean financially? That is what we're proposing the net savings for you is. Contractually, we guarantee in the contract that if we don't save you 1 penny, and this is what attracted me to this so much, if we don't save you anything, you never pay us anything, period. It is a 50% net savings to the district. The other 50% goes to fund the program and to Cinergistic. And when I talk about funding the program, I'll get a little further into that. We are going to hire 2 full-time energy specialists and assign them to Alachua County for the 5-year program and beyond. What that means is we are going to hire 2 individuals. Their sole purpose in life is to implement the program that we have put together with the district. They are going to be Teresa and Paul's extension of what they're doing now to get to that 970 square miles, to get to those schools in District 4 and 5 that are on the outskirts, to make sure that they're getting as much attention as the ones that are 5 miles from the central office. We cover all of those costs. The entire program cost is absorbed by Cinergistic. Are there any questions about that I wasn't clear about?
Are you talking about half of like year 1, 648,000?
Yes, sir. So pragmatically, you can double this. Right. What we're saying that we're going to reduce your overall spend is going to be almost $10 million over 5 years.
Okay, I got you. So
Over
this
$10 million over 5.
our savings after you get your 50%.
That's correct. This is what goes to the district. We save more, of course, that increases. I don't know what bug that was. I apologize. But again, at the end of the day, if we're not successful in Alachua County, you'll never pay us a dime. Contractually, you will never pay us a dime more than you save.
Do you look at things like meters and all that?
Yes, sir. And I'm gonna go into that a little bit in a minute and talk to you about how we do that.
Okay.
Mr. Jones, before you go on, can I ask you a question, please?
Yes,
Sure, go
ma'am.
ahead. It's certain.
I'm looking at the table there, and you were kind of, your audio's going in and out, but in year 1, there's $648,000 figure. In year 2, it jumps to 833. Is this is accumulation, or is that a separate individual fee of $833,000 for year 2, or is that accumulation?
No, so yes, ma'am. So in the aggregate, after year 2 is over, we would be at $1.4 million savings for the district.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not the difference.
Christie, I'm gonna give her a check and tell her.
Okay. All right. So
Mr. Jones, excuse
Yes,
me,
ma'am.
are you done?
Please call me Steve.
Oh, Steve, are you classified as an ESCO?
No, ma'am. We are the complete opposite of an ESCO.
You're the what? The opposite?
Yes, ma'am.
In what way?
And an ESCO is the minute that you get into a performance contract with an ESCO, be it Johnson Control, be it Honeywell, be it Train, you are immediately in debt with whatever purchase that you made with them, and then the savings goes to pay back the equipment.
I understood that, but okay, well, I didn't mean to distract from your
Oh, no, ma'am.
presentation. Go ahead.
No, and I'm going to touch on that in just.
I just know that Marion County had an ESCO and saved a lot of money over a course of several years.
Yeah, and people do that. And I'll show you in just a second kind of where we differentiate from that, but also.
But Marion is now a client of yours, is that right?
They've been a client of ours and have been implementing our program for, I don't want to tell you a false number, but probably 10 or more years. In fact, that's actually how we were introduced to Tommy Crosby at the county. He was an employee at Marion when Cinergistic had the program, and he wanted to bring it to the county.
I see.
All right, I'm gonna move on if there's not any more questions, and we can always come back to this at any point. Okay, real quickly to kind of, Ms. Roy, to get to your point or your question, there's really 3 ways to save. I'm not telling you something that you don't already know. Price management on the 5 to 7%. And this is all done by Dr. Wayne Turner, who puts out the annual energy management handbook. Price management 5 to 7%. If you can get GRU to just wake up one day and say, you know what, we'd like to cut you a break on what we're charging you, you would see some financial benefit.
We've been trying that for 2 years.
They just passed another bill. They're going in the opposite direction.
Mhm.
They're going up. Efficiency upgrades, and Ms. Roy, that is what you were talking about. Yes, there is no doubt if you replace a 20-year-old piece of equipment, an air conditioning system, with a brand new one, there is an R factor on that new piece of equipment that is going to save you money. If you run it the same amount of time, it will save you money. What we do on the conservation side is we find 25 to 30% and we focus on the way you run that piece of equipment. How often are you running that piece of equipment? If we need to get the classroom to 72 degrees at 7 o'clock each morning at Alachua Elementary School, it's not going to be the same as Buckholt or one of your newer schools to get it to that point. And I hope I said that school right.
Holtz.
Yes, ma'am. So we look at each school individually. We look at each envelope of each school individually to figure out the way that we can get that reduction. There is no doubt that if you invest $30 million in new equipment and you finance that for 20 years, like most of the ESCOs do, that you will see a reduction. But every dime that you save with that new equipment is going to pay off the equipment. That's the way the ESCO program works. Every dime that you save with us goes back into your general fund to do whatever you want.
Mm.
And I've used this analogy 100 times. Everybody's got a story and nobody really cares about anybody's. But there's nothing better than for us to say in Montgomery, Alabama 3 years ago that we put a roof on the Rosa Parks Library with the conservation efforts of the employees of the city of Montgomery. We were able to fund that library roof with our conservation efforts. So that's the big differential between us is you're not financing anything with us. Efficiency upgrades, and Alex and I have talked about this, you are immediately in debt. It immediately goes against your bonded indebtedness to get into a performance contract. There is never any debt with our program.
Steve, Steve, can
Yes,
you
ma'am.
hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me, I can't see the whole chart on the right-hand side on my screen. Can you just tell me the 25% to, I don't know what that is.
Yes, ma'am. I can't really see it either, but I've done this enough. I know it's 25 to 30% is what we find is the reduction in consumption through conservation practices. And the great thing about Alachua is you've already instilled that. Teresa's already been beating this drum, and it is nothing new to your organization to hear the word conservation practices at all. That is nothing new. We want to add to the bandwidth that you have and get into the technical part of this. We want to add to that, but yes, ma'am, that's 25 to 30.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Steve, can I ask you something else again?
Yes, sir, please.
You go back to price management. You're saying you're going to go to GRU and get them reduced?
No, sir. No, what we're saying that
Good luck on that.
aggregate, some areas are able to negotiate prices with their provider. And if you are able to negotiate prices with your provider, sometimes it's in the 5 to 7%. I will not sit here and tell you that I think that there's anything that we can do that GRU will say, I'd like to.
Because we've tried. They don't give us a break anyhow.
No, and I feel your pain. Again, like Alabama Power, they will tell you, and I'm not talking bad about providers, they will tell you that they'll send somebody to your district to help you reduce consumption. No, they're steadfast in what they're charging. And if I've noticed, GRU just signed a 5-year bill where they're going up again next year. So we want to combat the increase of their kilowatt hour cost with our reduction.
All right. I just want to go back. I thought I heard different.
No, sir, I apologize. Yeah,
No, you don't have to apologize.
we don't get in the price management business, honestly, because that's beating your head against the wall.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Well, who's Marion County have for their provider?
I do not know. I do not know who they have, but I will tell you one of the Marion County stories was they added almost 800,000 square feet over the course of the year. Their kilowatt cost per kilowatt hour went up 7%, and we were able to keep them at even budget with those increases and with those square footage changes.
Well, you know, we're in a big building program here. You're going to be involved with that then, probably.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll talk a little bit before we get done here about how we integrate ourselves into that pro forma of what you're doing.
You know, 75% of our electricity comes from GRU. We also have Florida Power Light and Hawthorne, Duke Energy and High Springs, and Clay Electric also in some of our areas. So that's the other.
Right. We're going to look in the aggregate at all of your utility providers, but I just want to be clear. I don't want to give any false bravado. There's nothing that we're going to be able to do to change any of your providers.
No, I'm just saying, but there'll be different prices.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
GRU is by far the highest over those.
Yeah. And we will look at that. We will look at that individually because, again, we're not concerned about price. We're concerned about consumption. We're only concerned about what we can control.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir. Real quickly with this, what we do, cost savings, we try to, I'm ad nauseum, we try to find those costs that you're spending. That culture of conservation, you've already done that. I've seen some, I looked at the, I can't remember what the name was, the EuroWiz program where you're so forward with your conservation program and letting the students and the teachers know the rewards for this. We want to be a part of that. We want to add to that. And then the last thing on this slide is the comfort of the learning environment is non-negotiable. It is non-negotiable. It is very pragmatic to think we just turn the air off in the summer and no heat in the winter. And of course your bills are going to go down. That is the complete polar opposite of our program. We are going to improve the comfort of the classroom, at a minimum, keep it to where it is, but by analytics and mathematical equations, we're going to find ways to get it to that comfort level in a more efficient fashion. And I'll be real clear about this. That takes manpower and that takes time because out of your 37, 38 schools, every single one of them is different. There is no set plan that you can put in place that's a blanket for every building. A building built in 2015 is absolutely not going to get to a comfort level the same as one that was built in 1920. And I don't have buildings that are 100 years old. I know we do in Montgomery. Everything has to be done on an individual basis. Real quickly about this, what we bring is your facility team. And I can say this because I was in operations for an absolute long time. To me, especially in the South, they're one of the hardest and most worked organizations outside of academics within a district. They are usually the first to be financially cut at budget time. There's a reason there's a term deferred maintenance. We'll just put it off. We have other things that we need to deal with. We are going to add to the bandwidth of your facility teams. One of the biggest things that a facility team does in Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi is comfort complaints. When Miss Johnson calls from ABC Elementary and she's been there 30 years and she says it's hot in her building, somebody needs to go out and see why Miss Johnson's building is hot. We're going to deploy our energy specialists to do that. We want to go out, instead of taking that technician that's working on a tangible product to go out and see why Miss Johnson's room is hot, we're going to send an energy specialist out there. We're going to put a couple loggers up in her office and we're going to measure her ambient temperature for a couple days to see if there is a problem. If there is, we want to figure out why there's a problem. But if not, we're going to tell Ms. Johnson, we've done analytics on your classroom for the past 72 hours. and we see that it's getting to 72 at the right time and keeping that temperature, we're going to take that burden off of your maintenance staff. We are. On the left here, and Troy being one of them, we have a plethora of professional engineers in all types of disciplines. We have mechanical, we have civil, we have hydrology. We're going to bring these people in when we see that there's an issue in a certain area, and they're going to come in and triage and come back to your facility group and say, here's what we suggest that you might do to fix this problem. Now, in Alabama, we call them third-party reps. If Paul wants to get a mechanical engineer to come out and do a survey of Alachua Elementary, that's going to come at a cost. There is no cost for that. That is what we do because of this partnership. If we don't succeed with our clients, then we don't succeed either. If you're not saving, we're not succeeding. So it behooves us to bring all of these elements: moisture control management, HVAC training, vendor support, huge part of this. If you talked about going into this construction capital projects you have moving forward, we're going to advise you on that. I've got a cousin that's an architect, and I love him very much, but an architect's going to put the biggest air conditioner he can put on a facility. He's getting 3% of the total cost of the project. Well, we're going to analyze that building and advise you that you may not need that 40-ton. The square footage of this high school or this gymnasium can probably get away with something less. We're going to be advising you as you're moving forward with those capital improvements, because it behooves us to be partners with you. And then the final part of this, the energy specialist, and I'm going to touch on it real quickly and then get to one more point. This is the person or the persons we're going to hire for Alachua County we're going to dedicate to this energy program. Their only job is to micromanage this program, finding those anomalies within your school. Example, we'll be doing audits at 2:30 in the morning. We'll be doing audits on Saturday afternoon. If for some reason, just think about it, if for some reason there's a sensor that's gone bad on a piece of equipment and it's kicking on at 9 o'clock at night, every night, and it's not supposed to, and it's running until the next morning, nobody will ever know that piece of equipment kicked on at 9 o'clock at night until they're walking through that building at 9 o'clock at night. And if nobody knows it, it is going to go unfounded, and it is going to continually spin that meter. We are in these buildings at all hours, making sure, we used to say you have to inspect what you expect. We are making sure that we are finding all of these anomalies as they happen. I don't think, in talking with Paul, talking with Teresa, I don't think you have the staff capacity to be able to do this for all 40 something of your buildings. That's where we find that our clients see the benefit of what we do and reap the benefits of the savings. We're adding more people to the equation. It just makes sense. The more people you have, the more things you're going to find. Any questions about that? Sometimes I talk way too much, I've been told, but I'm pretty passionate about this. I've seen it work. We talked about the energy specialist again, and let me be real clear about something here. We're not going to hire somebody from Bayonne, New Jersey to move down to Gainesville, Florida to try to instill a culture of conservation within your area. We are going to hire people from Gainesville. We just hired a lady at the county that was a Florida graduate, environmental science girl. She is doing fantastic. We are not looking to hire a mechanic. You've got mechanics. We stay in our lane. We do best with retired teachers, ex-coaches, ex-teachers. If you see up there, and I've got my camera over it, 20% of our energy specialists are veterans, but 33% of them were prior academics. James Newkirk, who was a teacher in Marion County when he left the school district, it works for us. Because we're looking for somebody that can relate, can work with Teresa's team and explain while we're doing these things. show the benefits of what we're doing. Talk carbon footprint, talk tree replacement, talk greenhouse emissions, not just turn your air conditioner off because I said so. That's not what we do. We look for people that meld into the community and make this a part of the culture. Last point about this, you will have complete, you will be involved in the hiring process from start to finish of who we hire. They have to be approved and be a good fit by not only your facility team, by Teresa, we're not bringing in our own employee and saying, this is what you got. Now, on the other hand, we're just not going to hire somebody's cousin because they've been living at your house on your couch and you need to find them a job. We're going to make sure that it's a good fit, but I want to make it real clear that we are going to bring somebody in that all parties are in agreement that this is a good fit. Any questions before I move on there? And I apologize. I know this is very fast and very awkward. Our technology platform, and I want to, this is daunting. This has really nothing to do with the board. These are things where you're going to be able to see, I call some of them niceties, not necessities. You're going to be able to see in your district specifically what your individual schools are doing in this program. You're going to be able to say at ABC High School has reduced its consumption by blank. You're going to be able to share that with your principals. You're going to be able to share that with your students. It becomes, especially the elementary schools, it becomes a culture. You know, there's a lot of our partners that have big boards up by the principal's office with the, I'm 50 something years old. I remember the United Way thermometer. I don't know if they still do that in school, but showing those successes and the things that they have reached. We're going to get that out to them. But more importantly, this software that is ours, proprietary to us, that you have access to, it's going to help us find those anomalies. I'm going to share one more thing with you that I think is very pertinent in this time. I'm going to stop sharing this and try to share another screen. I was really at a bonus for sharing one, so if I can share a second, I'm going to be really impressed with myself. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes, it's a little small.
It is. All right. I'm going to try to open this. This is a tool. It's called simulation. We use this in various ways where we predict things that are happening. So, for example, if you have a Rotary Club, a Kiwanis Club, somebody that uses your facilities, it may be an in-kind service that you're giving them, that gymnasium or that school for their meeting, but you'd like to know what the actual financial impact of what you're doing is. Food services. Do you have third-party food services?
No.
Okay. If you were interested in showing what your billing is, how much utilities are your food services department using from a kitchen in an elementary school, we can extrapolate that out to where you can say, here's what it's costing for food services, for athletics, to use the equipment in this school. Just a way to measure that. But
Eileen, let me ask the question. Can
Sure.
you find out what the kitchen's costing inside that cafeteria?
Absolutely. What we'll, even if it's not metered, even if it is not metered, we can go in, because we have done this so many times, and that is something, usually it's, I brought up food services because that is a big touching point with boards, that there's a lot of utilities being used by food services in kitchens that's not being accounted for. We can take the equipment, we can take the R factor of each piece of equipment, the amount of time used, the days that it's being used, and we can extrapolate and formulate out exactly what it's costing for that kitchen to be used for those services. Absolutely. Now, this is something that we use in a lot of different fashions. A lot of times we use them in natural disasters. If a hurricane were to come through, I don't know if you've had to deal with a FEMA reimbursement for using any facilities. It is a nightmare. I can't get all the, I've done that. It is a nightmare. But I'm going to give you an example of something that may come into play that a lot of our clients and partners are looking at. This is Greenfield ISD in Texas. This is a school district in Texas, and they allow us to use this, their business model. But what you're looking at is a life year of utility spend at Kenneth Davis Elementary School. And that's what a good year of spend is. Well, let's just say that Governor DeSantis or whoever makes the decisions in Florida says, we're going to start, when we start school back, we're going to go to weekend schools, or we're going to go to 12-hour-a-day schools, whatever this new normal looks like. Let's just look at this and say, all right, we want to find out what school is the most efficient if we're going to have to open schools up for different times. So I'm just going to take May, June, and July, and I'm going to increase the use for 5 days in May, June, and July. Give me just a second here, because we know what an average year looks like at this school. But we're going to say, what would it cost? What would it look like if we use this school 5 more days? If they structure it this way. All right, we'll run a simulation for you and say, okay, Madam Superintendent, if you need to have 5 more days of school this month, Kenneth Davis Elementary School, Alachua County Elementary School, it's going to cost $4,203 in expended energy if we open that school up for 5 extra days in those 3 months. Now let's look at a different elementary school. Let's look at Santa Fe School, the high school, I believe it is. Let's see what the actual cost is in that facility and maybe compare to see which one we want to use that's more efficient. Mr. Paulson, you had mentioned earlier, and this will be the last thing, I know I've overgone my time. You had mentioned earlier about the capital projects that you're going to do. So again, let's look at this school. We've got the baseline of whatever school you've got. And let's just say you want to change all of your T8 lights to LEDs. You may be looking at putting LEDs at this certain school. And what is that going to cost me as we do our capital project estimations? So we would take, currently have T8s. Let's look at what LED lighting looks like. All right, we'd be able to say that at that facility, if we replaced all of the lights, because we have the baseline, we have the empirical data of the baseline. If you replace all of the LED or the T8 lights with LEDs, you're going to save $6,160 a year at 9.95 cents a kilowatt hour, which is whatever rate you have. Well, let's see what the ROI is on that. I'm sorry, you're muted, Mr. Paulson.
I think if I'm not, our GRU is like 15 cents a kilowatt.
Yeah, and I'm using Mansfield ISD.
Okay, now we do have one out.
Yeah, it would be incremental to whatever but what I'm able to do here.
Okay.
Yeah, we're able to do it. We're able to do it with set points. We can change set points, see what different set points is going to bring what ROI. We can actually look, if you were looking to replace a roof on a facility with a built-up roof or a roll roof, there's an R factor for all of these upgrades, and we can simulate what that will cost going forward, kind of help with your decision on how we do capital planning.
Yeah, like Gainesville High, we're going to replace all those old buildings with 40-something classrooms that'll be in a new building, and you'll be involved with that. That should make it more efficient too.
Absolutely. And one last caveat that I didn't cover, and I apologize. Anytime in this program, anytime in our program that you do a capital expenditure upgrade. So at Gainesville High School, we've got a baseline that we measure off of. Just everybody measures off a baseline. That's the industry standard. If for some reason you do a $500,000 upgrade to Gainesville High School and put in an all new air conditioning lighting system, LEED certified, we would then redo the baseline. we would redo the baseline and extrapolate out those upgrades because we get no credit for anything that you do that is a capital expenditure. That is a huge portion of what we do, and we do it all the time. The only thing that we require the district to purchase is an energy cap license, which is a measurement and verification accounting software. It's about $30,000 a year. We guarantee that in the savings through the contract. But what that does is that keeps our moral compass north. We are not telling you what you saved. A third-party accounting firm that does the DOJs, does the DOE, they're the ones that are telling us the true savings. So when you do those upgrades, we adjust the baseline so we don't get half of the credit for something that you did that cost you $500,000. If that makes any sense. I mean, I
Makes a lot of sense.
explained that right. Same with weather days. You know, people would say, well, 2 or 3 degrees difference for 2 weeks in the summer is not that big of a deal. It is in 5.5 million square feet. We adjust those out. We only, and you can ask any of our partners, we are very, very conscious of only getting credit for something that we have affected. So this has been a lot. At the end of the day, I believe in this program. I'm passionate about it. We are a funding source, and at this time, we really, really know that the need for our clients and our partners is funding. We'll talk about this later as we go down the road, but one of the things, and John's on here with me, we're going to defer for anybody that becomes partners with us during the COVID-19 pandemic, whatever we're in. We're going to defer the first 3 months of any type of fees be paid to us. What that means is we're going to allow you to reap 100% of all of your savings as kind of a cash infusion into the districts as we're going through this we want to call this that we're going through, because we are partners with these school districts. It's not a fee-driven program. You're not hiring a consultant. We truly understand the plight and where you're going. So I've taken probably more time than I should, and I apologize. But if you have any further questions, I'm for myself or John or for Troy, please.
One more thing.
Yes,
I
sir.
say one more thing too. I figure if we save 1 cent a kilowatt hour, it's $450,000. That's like the savings you're looking at there.
Right. Yes, sir. I didn't hear you very well. Let me see if I
I said if we save 1 cent a kilowatt hour, that's $450,000 to $500,000 in our district.
Okay, I don't have your kilowatt hour numbers in front of me.
Well, it's about 6% to 7%, and that's what you said at the beginning. It matches your percentage.
Oh yeah, no, sir. We're going to be looking at in the 20%.
Yeah, a couple of years.
Well, right. We're going to be great point. We're going to be pushing the car uphill for the first 6 or 8 months. There's no doubt about it. But once we get there, yeah, when we're in our stride, we're talking 18, 20, 22, 24%. No doubt. And
credit 3 and 4 or something.
yeah, there's absolutely, you're where you are today because of the successes that you've had with your organization and your conservation program. But we have noticed, and it's just a factual thing, that the trend is going up. It's going up. Y'all were over 1 million kilowatt hours in 18, 19, above 17, 18 with the same square footage.
Mhm.
We're going to get it going the other way. And we're going to do that by partnering with Teresa and her team and taking all the good things that she's built
Mhm.
and putting it on steroids.
Well, she's pretty good.
No, there's no doubt. But where she has been so good at focusing on, I mean, extremely good at the programs and implementing the programs and the LEED certified, we're more concerned about getting out there in the buildings at 2 o'clock in the morning and finding the discrepancies. And I promise you, I can say this as the guy that did it, there's buildings that are running that should not be running all over the district. We got to find them and stop them.
Well, the way we used to do it is you just look at the bill and you say this, they leaving it on all weekend and stuff like that. but you're
Yeah.
going to be here specifically getting times they're doing things.
Oh, yeah, we're going to be looking at it granularly. We're not going to wait 30 days till the bill comes in.
Yeah, I got you.
I'll tell you, like, look at it. We're going to find it. We're going to be proactive, not reactive.
Thank you, Mr. Roy.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for me?
No, you're good.
Okay, gentlemen and ladies, thank you so much. And again, thank you for what you do. And I hope to see you maybe in person shortly, but if not, I'll reach out to Alex. And Madam Superintendent, I haven't been able to speak to you yet, but thank you for allowing me to do this. And everybody stay healthy and well.
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes, sir.
I was thinking if Steve could, I don't know what his plans were, but if he could stay with us until we get to board member discussion.
Sure. That's what I was hoping. Don't leave, Steve. We
Yes,
have
ma'am.
citizen input
you.
and board discussion,
Yes, ma'am.
if you don't mind.
Do I just sit here? I mean, I don't.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
I'll mute myself and go get a Coca-Cola.
Okay. Mr. Moore, do we have any citizen input?
Not at this time, Mrs. Roy. We actually do have somebody watching from the facility today for the first time, but they are not here to speak. And there have not been any calls. I did put the number up. I hope people saw. Again, we
Yes,
have
we
two
saw.
numbers. That's 955-7544. If you can quickly get in, if you want to talk about the Cenergistic presentation. Once Mr. Bowles does the impact fee one, that number is going to be 955-7613. I'll put those numbers back up in a little bit. But we didn't get any emails either. So at this time, there does not appear to be any citizen input for this
Okay.
presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moore. And now we'll open it up for board discussion. If anyone would like to speak.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hyatt.
Well, first, I was very positive until I saw Steve lift his Auburn mug. And so we may have to reconsider
I could turn it around.
at that point. But I wanted to say that I find this as a win-win situation, and sort back at Steve, if I could do that. And I do really appreciate the fact that he is acknowledging what has been happening with Miss Burlingwood for years, and that we are on the right path. And I see this as a chance to move to a new level. And when I say win-win, it's a win for the school district, it's a win for the company, it's a win for the environment, and any money that can go into the classrooms that would have gone in the pockets of our providers, that's a good thing. And as someone who I taught at Key West High School for 6 years without air conditioning, and so I not that I have to have it, but I did appreciate the Venn diagram that included comfort, because if we don't make sure that if we're just trying to cut funding and we have our employees, and more important, our students uncomfortable, then that's not going to be where we need to go. And I think that the company's commitment to making sure that everyone is comfortable, and that's a major factor in their goals. So I'm very pleased with the presentation. I'm also know that all we have to do if to verify any of this is to get on the phone to our neighbors here in Florida. And I want to, Steve, thank you very much for the, I thought, very thorough and presentation, and it certainly helps me understand what you do, how you do it, and I hope this will be a very good fit for our district if that's what the board decides to do.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hyatt.
Thank you,
Anyone
Madam Chair.
else like to speak? No? Well, I will say, I loved your presentation too. I've been high on this for a long, long time. And I echo Mr. Hyatt's remarks in that we're very proud of the work that Teresa's done over the years. And you know that we won the Green Buildings Award a couple of years ago. I think it was 2016. You know, and we're honored in Washington for that national award. So we're happy that you're acknowledging what she's done. Has been a good thing. And everything else is just wonderful. Anything we can say for all the reasons Mr. Hyatt mentioned, I'm really enthusiastic about. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And I appreciate it. And I like I said, I was a client, I was a public servant. I'm well aware of dollars. At some point, a lot of people don't understand that there is a responsibility to be a good steward of a taxpayer dollar.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Jones, I'd like to know the list that you put up on the board of the different districts that Cenergistic is with.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have others, or those are the only ones?
No, we have over 1,500. I'd be glad.
In our state, I'm sorry not to clarify that.
Yes, ma'am. I can get you, let's see, off the top of my head, we've had clients, Osceola, Sarasota, Pinellas. I can get you a variety of those if you would like those.
Would you do that and also include the number of years that they've been with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Sure.
Eileen,
Yes, sir.
Steve, I appreciate it. It was a good presentation. We've been knocking our heads against the wall with this with GRU in the city of Gainesville. At least we get to make some progress. And I think anything, Teresa and Alex, I'm glad they went out and either they found you or you found each other. But I'm glad. Sounded good to me. Your figures match the figures I see, so that helps too.
That is good.
As an ex-Gator football player that lost our only game we lost 50 years ago was to Auburn, we got you this year.
Yeah, I know you did it.
50 years and we got you.
I couldn't stand, I had to sit in Alex's office and smile as I saw his Gator stuff, and everybody.
We had our 50-year reunion. I couldn't have had a better present.
Did you play? You said you played at Auburn? I mean, played at Florida?
Yeah, that was the only game we lost.
About that.
So we all came back 50 years, and what a present.
Did you, and forgive my math, but did you play with Spurrier?
I played 1 year with Spurrier. I played with Carlos Alvarez and John Reeves and them.
Okay.
You had Pat Sullivan. You beat us. We were number 6 in the nation.
Oh, yeah.
50 years is worth waiting.
I agree 100%. Well, we beat Alabama, and that's all we care about in this state, so it's good.
All right.
Thank you all very much for your time, and I will be talking with you soon.
Thank
And Ms.
you,
McNeely,
Steve.
I'll get that information, Ms. McNeely, to Alex, and maybe vis-a-vis he get it to you. Thank you all.
Thank you. I guess we're waiting for the impact fee presentation by Mr. Gene Bowles. Mr. Moore, is he ready to go?
I think so. I didn't know if we were going to have an introduction first from Paul or Suzanne or Alex. But if not, I can certainly just bring Mr. Bowles in. He's turned on his audio. I'm going to request that he start his video.
I've done that.
I can do a quick intro. I mean, if you remember, Mr. Bowles was with us a few months ago with his initial report. The board asked him to go back and look at some additional ways to kind of divide up the county so that we don't unfairly harm parts of the county when the growth is more in other areas, and he has done that. And I will be in the background going through his updated presentation as he talks to you. So with that, I'll stop. And Mr. Bowles, it is on you.
Thank you. In order for full disclosure, I have to tell you that I graduated from Auburn in 1966. But I've been with Florida long enough that I'm really only conflicted when Auburn and Florida play. So,
We'll
small
forgive
world.
you.
Okay. As Brian reminded you, back in early February, we presented the findings of our impact fee study. And in the context of that discussion, the board has essentially directed the staff to look at the prospect of modifying the study related to the eastern part of the county versus the western part of the county where the most of the growth is occurring. We did that and appreciate the opportunity to present that. Brian's going to, handle the information. Essentially, he's simply showing you the report that we call the Public Educational Impact Fee Program Implementation Strategy. It picks up on where we left off in the discussion in early February. Brian, if you would go to the bottom of that page, I think that's where the table is. Yeah, let's stop just for a moment at that table. This table and table 1A behind it are the essence of the impact fee study. Just to remind you, the purpose of that study was to determine the maximum allowable fee that you could charge. And we do that by looking at housing types. There are 6 of them, and the numbers that you see, the 0, 100, 0, 200, et cetera, are the property appraiser use codes that are used to identify housing types. We then compare that with those residences, addresses of those residences with the students, where the students live, and go through a set of calculations to determine the cost of student station and how much can be, what the maximum is that can be attributed to a new home, a new housing type being built. That particular table shows all 6 of the housing categories that we use for that purpose. Brian, if you could go to the next page, the composite, top of it there. This essentially combines those into single family and multifamily. That's the way we apply concurrency, school concurrency, in terms of the program that we have in place. And those represent a composite number that, again, gives you a maximum allowable fee for single family and multifamily. The recommendation that we made was that you would apply the impact fee district-wide, and it applies for permanent construction. Does not, this is by choice, but it does not, would not be used for relocatables and other. It essentially is looking at permanent facilities and the cost of that construction and the contribution that each new home makes to that. So essentially that's the information that was carried forward from the study that we presented a few weeks ago. What you asked the staff to do, and that became my task, was to look at the rationale for considering the eastern part of the county differently. Now, the reason we had recommended this district-wide is because it allows you to expend these, to collect these funds on a district-wide basis and expend them on a district-wide basis. But the question becomes, does it make sense to treat the eastern part of the county differently than the western part? The task was outlined essentially to begin by looking at the concurrency service areas and attendance zones and so forth, primarily to see if there was a rationale for a different way of drawing that line. And as I began that work, it became pretty obvious that there was. And in the early part of the analysis, I defined an eastern zone, which I've identified as Impact District A, and a western zone, Impact District B. Brian, could you show the map that's on the next page, and then I want to come back to those numbers in just a second. This particular map is in the report, and you will see that it, of course, generally bisects the county. A little more land area in the western part, but not too different in terms of geographic area. And you see the line of demarcation going through the central part of Gainesville. That in fact is Main Street. And that coincides generally with the concurrency service areas and the attendance zones. They're not exact, but this appears to be a pretty clear definition that makes some sense and I use for the analysis. Brian, if you could go to the next page and let them see the detailed map, and I'd like to go back to that table before that. This is simply a blow up of that same map, but it also shows the schools. Again, you will see the relationship within the city of Gainesville. That is Main Street. And so it's a clear demarcation that's easily identifiable geographically that it is used for that to define these two impact fee areas. Now, Brian, if you could go back to the table, I think it's table 2 above that. All right. What this table shows you is the substantial difference between those two areas. Don't necessarily need to get into a lot of detail, but you can see the differences. Out of 122,000 residential addresses, 103,000, 104,000 of those are in the western part of the county. Only around 18, you can read the numbers essentially, and then they are broken down between single family and multifamily. Students, of course, as you would expect, follow that residential inventory. The inventory we use for the student generation multipliers had 28,295 students. Those are broken down, as you see there, between 22,700 in the western part of the county and about 5,600 in the eastern part of the county. So there's a substantial difference in terms of residential inventory and students, of course, between those two different areas. Okay, if we move forward, and don't hesitate to ask me a question on these as we go through them, but if we can move to what's page 6, I believe, Brian, on the report. This table and the one in table 4 that follows essentially is a tabulation of the capacity and enrollment, the current capacity and enrollment in the schools that represent, in this case, Impact District A. And you see that it's obvious the schools are there, but most that you recognize being listed. What is important there is the recognition that we're talking about utilization in the range of 60% in the eastern part of the community, and underutilization in the eastern part of the county and what in Impact District A. Brian, if you can go to 4, the same information in showing for the western part of the county, but in the elementary, you see that we are overall about 97% capacity, and in elementary, a lower amount in middle, about 78%. Then in high schools, right at 95%, and overall about 94%. A significant difference in utilization of these schools between the two impact fee districts that I've defined for you.
What page is table 4 on?
Sorry?
I got the book here too. I'm looking at table 4. What page is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Table 4 is on page 7. Okay,
All right. Thanks. I don't think it doesn't match my book. All right.
Uh,
I'll have to look there.
Gene and Dr. Paulson, it might be that the link on the agenda started, the first pages were the previous presentation, and then the update comes at the bottom. So it starts numbering over. It does say page 7, but it's probably closer to page 29 overall if you have both together.
oh. Yeah, I'm looking at the implementation strategy itself. If that's been combined with the original fee study, that would cause a pages
Right,
maybe be
right.
misnumbered. Or have you found it?
No. That's all right. I'll just look on the screen.
Okay. All right. Now, Brian, if you can go to the, so essentially those two charts identify the existing circumstances that we are reported in your 5-year district facilities plan and that we're beginning with. Beginning table 5A, here we're talking about projected capacity needs. Now let me point out that we have projected needs in 2 ways. One is the method we use in the 5-year district facilities plan, and that's using the COFTI projections, the capital full-time equivalents numbers that are provided by the Department of Education. We use those for purposes of concurrency, and they are offered here as in the first page, tables 5A and 5B. The second method is to use the Bureau of Economic and Business Research projections. Those are the official population projections for the state. And to make a projection using the first 10 years of that countywide projection, the Alachua County countywide projection, and using that annual growth rate as another means of projecting the enrollment to sit side by side with the COFTI. So the table 5A and 5B are giving you the COFTI projection, the Department of Education projection, and tables 6A and 6B show you the Bieber projection that we use. In the case, and we use a 5-year COFTI and a 10-year COFTI. The 5A, you will see that the expected increase in enrollment and utilization in the eastern part of the county, impact district A, is steady. There's not a significant increase in enrollment that is projected there. If we move to 5B, that's of course the western part of the county, we are seeing substantial, let's see, go back up a little bit, Brian, and make sure I'm in the right one here. Okay, yeah. The projections are fairly flat using the COFTI numbers, but you still are looking at projections in 5 and 10 years in the 90% category overall, and of course a number of individual schools within that category are well over 100% utilization in the 5-year and 10-year projections. If we move then to the next, to 6A and 6B, if we use the Bieber projection, that's the Bureau of Economic Business Research, that growth rate is 0.77% annually. It's less than 1%, but it still produces somewhat higher numbers for our projections for that 5 and 10-year period. You will see that in 6A that you have on the screen there is some growth, of course, on that projection in the eastern portion of the county, but it does not push any at all beyond around the 60-65% utilization for the eastern portion. In other words, the growth in the eastern portion under both projections still remains well within the capacity of those schools. When we look though at 6B, you will see that growth rate does generate and produce overall capacity demands. In the case of elementary, In the 10-year period, almost 110% capacity utilization. And in the case of high schools, about 102% overall, 104%, again, with middle schools being expected to be overall within capacity. So essentially those, by both projections, the eastern portion of the county does not indicate any need for new capacity, whereas in the western portion, we do expect to see capacity needs again as we utilizing the population projection. Okay. Go to the next slide, table 7 for me, Brian. All right. In addition to those numbers, which are essentially looking at growth rates and so forth, we also looked at what is actually happening. As I think everyone is aware, we review projects that from the local governments, single family plats and multifamily site plans for concurrency. Those are what we term active development projects. There are currently 49 of those projects in the pipeline. These are not comprehensive plan amendments and rezonings. These are actual plats or multifamily site plan reviews that are in some stage of development. Generally, we're looking at the potential that these would generate students in 2 to 5 years. The point here is that only 3 of those active projects, representing about 139 residential units and potentially 42 students, are in the eastern part of the county. And I would also point out that those 3 projects are actually they're in Gainesville, and they're very close to the boundary that we've identified. So essentially, we're not seeing new development in the pipeline in the eastern portion of the county, especially in the extreme eastern areas in terms of Hawthorne, Waldo, and other areas. In contrast, we have 46 projects that are active, representing 4,395 residential units, and based on our multipliers, those will generate potentially 1,000 students. Essentially, a substantial difference in terms of what's occurring in the western part of the community and the eastern part. The findings are, I think, probably obvious for what I've suggested here. The first one is simply that there's a big, significant difference between the two that's identified by these numbers. 15% of the residential inventory is within the eastern region with 20% of the students, 32%. In the eastern region, 32% of the existing or programmed student stations are within the eastern region with 59% utilization. And in the western area, 68% of the existing and permanent student stations are within that area with 94% utilization. The second finding is that projected enrollment does not create a demand for new capacity within the eastern part of the county. Over that 10 years, the utilization of existing and programmed student stations would increase by 59% to 64%, and only 3% of the actual residential development is within the eastern region. The third finding is that the projected growth in the western region will create demand for capacity at the elementary and high school levels. And I think, and you can see the statistics that I have attached to that number. Scroll down a little bit for the table there, Brian. That's summarized essentially in that table 8, summary of key findings, showing the difference between the 2 areas from the standpoint of capacity and enrollment. The conclusion, I think, should be pretty obvious to you that there is a justification for school-related purposes within the school's district's mission to make a distinction between the eastern portion of the county and the western portion of the county that is supported by the information and data that I've shared with you there. It does support a impact fee in the western part of the county. It does not support assessment of impact fee within the eastern district because of then there is no indication that new development would, in the eastern part of the community, would constitute the need for new capacity. This leads to a recommended strategy that if you are going to, if we adopt an impact fee with this distinction of the impact fee, the two impact fee areas, A and B, you should do four specific things. That you would assess impact fees on single family and multifamily dwellings as no later than certificate of occupancy. This is simply the way the ordinance would be structured. At the time the home is occupied, the impact fee is created. That the impact fees would not exceed a maximum supportable fee. I identified that at the beginning from the original study. That you would be based on a determination of no capacity need, the impact fee established for new residential development within the impact fee district A would be 0. And then by resolution fiscal policy, impact fee proceeds may not be expended for new capacity within the district A. So if you don't collect it, you can't spend it there, but there's no indication that any capacity would be demanded by new development in the eastern portion. That essentially gives you the result of the finding based on your request that we look at that at the differences between those two areas.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bowles. We have two portions, if you'll stick around for the citizen input or questions, if there is any. And
Yeah.
after that, the board discussion. Is Mr. Moore, has anybody called in or?
Not at this time, Mrs. Roy, and I checked with Jackie Johnson just a couple minutes ago. There's nobody down there. We also didn't get any emails. If you want to wait a minute, since I just put the number up,
Sure.
just to give a chance, just because it takes a little while for them to get to call, and then there's 25 numbers for the operator to dial. So I'll tell you it about 60 seconds, and the 955-7613 is in the office next to me, so I will know if the phone's ringing. I should also, point out that the YouTube feed is actually about 15 or 20 seconds behind us. So people watching at home are actually getting the information 20 seconds after we're talking about it. Another reason to give them a little bit longer to call.
Okay.
And I'm going to check with Dee Dee right now. Her phone remains silent, so I think you can go on to board discussion.
Okay, the floor is open for board discussion. If anyone would like to speak to this report.
I would. This is certain.
Go ahead.
Mr. Bowles, thank you for getting back to us. Took a little bit longer than I expected, but thank you for bringing this alternative method back of possibly assessing impact fees. It was aligned up with what I thought it would align up with. And so I think you've provided us good information to be able to make a decision upon, and nothing really, the costing as well as the table 7 and 8 were very helpful to me. I made a lot of notes about that, but I appreciate the update on this and getting back to us with that. So I had a question early on, but you answered it when you started to give a distinction between the two, was it Tofty, how you pronounce it, and the Bieber? table. So you cleared that up for me, and I appreciate that. So I just wanted to thank you for the info, and the presentation was easy to follow and will help to guide me in my decision making.
Let me add that the data was much clearer in supporting this than I expected it to be. When we really looked at this, the delineation that I showed you, the difference between the two areas, both in existing development and potential development, as well as capacity, was very, very clear in making this distinction. And I point out that it's supported by school-related issues. We're not suggesting that we do this because of supporting economic development or other things of this nature. While that's important, that's not the school board's mission, but this is clearly supported by school-related information and data to use the two areas. I just wanted to emphasize that it's I believe a very clear support.
Well, I can agree with that. I don't know if you'll recall from our last meeting, is those were the points that I raised, is that I couldn't understand why we'd have one fee countywide for all of the CSAs when, just based on my knowledge of being a citizen in the county, I could see where the development was. You know, we all travel around the county and we see where the new building is taking place. And I could not justify having, to me, it didn't make sense to have a fee on construction in the east when there was capacity in every one of those schools that are located over there. So for me, I always felt that the data would support having a different fee for different areas. And I appreciate that the report was prepared and that was not hidden or just camouflaged over. So I appreciate you bringing light to the fact that the numbers didn't lie. The numbers just, you know, it was just plain, and it didn't have to be doctored or propped up. It stood on its own merit or whatever. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Certain. Anyone else like to speak?
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
A couple of questions. One is if the board enacted fees for impact fees, we would have another decision as to whether or not we went for the maximum allowable or whether we had a different percentage. Is that correct?
That's correct. I don't recommend that you use the maximum. Most districts, in fact, I provided in the original report a comparison table where you can see what's done around the state on these, and what you'll see is the average and median numbers are in the range of $5,000 for single family dwelling. And then of course the multifamily would be it should be a proportion of that, and so forth. The purpose of the original study was to establish the maximum fee. Where you set the fee is then up to your judgment and to discussion about where the fee would be established. I do believe it's important that the fees are set in with proportion. If you, for example, use the $5,000 fee number, you would want the multifamily to be proportional to the maximum allowable fee, for example. There needs to be some rationale to that. But that is your decision, and it is the study itself establishes the maximum, but you can establish it anywhere below that.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, and this may be a question either for Mr. Bowles or maybe an attorney question. If fees were enacted, I understand what you were talking about as far as they wouldn't be applicable until occupancy, but what I was asking is, can we determine a starting date So we enacted the fees. Would it automatically start the next fiscal year with the calendar year, or could we set it for some time in the future?
The state law requires that you provide a 90-day window.
Okay.
They cannot be effective earlier than 90 days from the point at which they are adopted. Otherwise, I believe you would have discretion. Now, Brian may have some thoughts about that, but that's essentially what the state law establishes as a parameter, that there must be a 90-day.
So we have a minimum of 90 days. Would we all? But again, would there be some sort of a maximum? And
no, there is no. The state law does not identify any maximum time.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. Anyone else?
Chair, may I make this is Suzanne Nguyen. May I ask a question of Jean for a point?
Sure, of course. Go ahead, Ms. Nguyen.
Mr. Bowles, can you explain the process for the board, in addition to them, if they choose to establish an impact fee, the process by which that's implemented, the steps that we need to go through with the local, county, and city entities, and the adoption of an ordinance, please?
The collection of the fees is done by the local governments. The lead on that is the county. There would need to be an implementing ordinance and then an interlocal agreement that simply indicates that the communities would collect the fee. Brian, I don't know how much you've gotten into that with the county and so forth, but again, that's the next step that you would have. That's the point in which you would establish what the actual fee would be, dates of the execution date, that kind of thing, as well as the mechanics of collecting fees and transmitting them to the school board.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bowles. Yeah, I will just say that I greatly appreciate your hard work on this, and that you took the input of the school board into account in looking at the two sides of the county. I like that it's got a very clear dividing line of Main Street between east and west. And I just think you did a great job on this. I know one of my questions was just what Mr. Hyatt asked is, do you recommend less than the maximum allowable? And you said, yes, you do recommend less. So, and I know you said it's our decision, but what do you recommend, or do you have a recommendation vis-a-vis what other counties have done in the state?
In the first study, I provided you a table, comparison table, which
Right.
that was actually some information that we took from an Orange County study. It was done just in last August and done by Tyndall Oliver, to give credit where it's due. That's not my research, but theirs. You will see that table shows you the maximum. This is for the single family per dwelling unit.
Right.
They also had multifamily and others, but this is the key number. The single family number is always the important one because that's where most of your students are generated. So that table shows the maximum allowable fee and then what was actually adopted.
Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah.
And then at the bottom of that table, you will see an average and a median number that's in the range of about 5,000. Let me say that so you can, and of course they range, differ quite a bit. The information indicates, but most of the communities use a number that is less than the maximum. Let me say that calculation of the maximum number is a snapshot in time. It is a very good number at a general level, but in terms of detailed, specific numbers, you know, when you look a number like 4,483, that's not very precise. So those maximum numbers, you want to be able to defend the number that you have. And so the maximum numbers they are a snapshot in time, and they can vary, you know, daily almost. So the practice typically has been to use a lower number as you see around the state. Now,
Right.
I don't have in terms of making a recommendation, there is not a recommended number. You can simply evaluate them in terms of what they would produce, for example. I mean, what kind of revenue would be generated at certain levels where you might set that fee. Now, we have not done that because that discussion has not yet taken place about where you would actually establish the fee.
Right. Well, I do remember that the last recession that we had back in 2008-9, a lot of counties, and I think our county as well, backed off on charging impact fees because there was very little development, you know, in those years. The trick is to get them up and running when the economy picks up and people are building. Otherwise, we miss out on imposing them. So I think it might depend on what is going to happen as a result of this pandemic as to how quickly we want to impose the impact fees, right?
Well, obviously, that's a huge unknown.
Yes, that's right. It is
my
right
opinion.
now. It is right now. But I think development is proceeding as far as I know, you know, according to our information that we got last night, there are people that want to buy and want to start developing immediately or are already doing it. So,
Ms. Roy, let me make an observation about those two in the recession, the 2008 recession.
right,
Housing was a big part of that downturn.
right,
And when you looked at housing development during that period of time, the housing starts were dramatically reduced.
correct.
Then there was a significant movement to either not adopt or reduce impact fees in that regard. I wish I had the crystal ball like everybody else to have an idea what our current situation would do in terms of housing, but certainly we're going to be in some tough financial times. I just make that observation because, as say in 2008, housing was a very big part of that downturn.
Right. Well, thank you so much. That was a great table that you just showed, and I, you know, will use that, I'm sure.
Madam
Can I
Chair.
ask another question, Ms. Roy?
Sure. Ms. Certain, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Mr. Bowles, could you tell me why, I think you mentioned it in the first workshop, but I can't recall it, and I was looking through my notes, why you don't recommend going in at 100% of the max amount?
Well, it hasn't typically been the practice in Florida, but that's simply a choice you make. The maximum amount is a very detailed number based on a snapshot in time. What we try to do is and even in developing that number, we try to make sure that we've given all the credit we can to the new residents in terms of other taxes paid. And so I think that the general practice has been to not set the impact fees at the absolute maximum amount, but to set them at something lower, representing that you're not asking. It reduces the burden to new development, and not any way to really answer that other than to say that it's a matter of choice, and I can have given you the information about what communities typically have done around the state.
Okay, I was asking, I thought you had given a reason the first time, and after the first presentation, there was an article from Hillsborough County where they came in over their maximum. And I noticed in the table that's in the first book that you gave us, there's just one, I see one county that's at 120%. think St. Lucie, if I'm looking at it correctly, I don't have a ruler here, but St. Lucie, but Hillsborough, shortly after our first Hillsborough County went in, they doubled theirs, doubled the maximum, what had been, I guess, set as their maximum fee. But so I was just wondering what the reasoning was that you were saying you don't recommend coming in at the 100%.
Well, it's opposed, it's not as much of a recommendation as an observation based on what the practice has been around the state. Now, I would say that I don't know why the St. Lucie study would show the 120%. There's got to be some reason for that, because they could not do that on a strict interpretation of impact fee rules. So there's something going on there that's different. I didn't do that research, so I couldn't tell you exactly what that is, but it is pretty clear in the application of impact fees that you can exceed that maximum allowable number. Again, I'm not sure why that is, that St. Lucie number is where it is.
Thank you.
This is Roy.
Yes, I think that Mr. Hyatt wanted to say something first, if you don't mind. He had asked.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I had two questions, one for Mr. Bowles, one for Mr. Rella. Mr. Bowles, if you could, and I know that this is something we went over the last workshop and we've gone over before, but if you could, for the public watching, if you could give just a brief paragraph or two, a thumbnail of what impact fees can be used for and what they can't be used for.
Impact fees can only be used to increase capacity. Now that can, and that can include the acquisition of land. And we have in the Alachua study included land costs as well as construction costs. Now, that's not just classrooms, that's the full school. In other words, core facilities, land, the improvement of the schools, anything that is part of that construction cost to add new capacity those can be funded with impact fees. You cannot use it for operational, you cannot use it to correct deficiencies. So there's an accounting process that has to take place to ensure that funds that are accumulated through the impact fees do in fact go to pay for new capacity.
Well, thank you very much. And I think that's a very important point, because sometimes when we have these discussions and we have with the public and public comment, there's a tendency for all monies to be lumped in the same basket, and that's important. It's certainly part of our job to speak clearly to that point, so I do appreciate that reminder and clarification. Assistant Superintendent Rella, I would like to request before this is on the agenda, when and if this becomes an agenda item on a board meeting, if you could provide a table that would give us pretty close to what we could expect financially, based on 100%, based on 75%, based on 50%, or whatever numbers that you think would be helpful, and just so just in looking at choices in front of us, I think it would be helpful to have a good ballpark as to what kind of fees we're looking at.
So I would obviously be happy to do that for the board and public. So I think on the last go around that we looked at this maybe a couple of years ago, I was able to get some permitting numbers from the county. They were happy to provide those, and that gave me kind of an allocation method of, 5-year look back if we would have done it 5 years ago, what would we have received? Looking forward, I mean, obviously there's a lot of uncertainty. I'm not sure I'd be able to project that, but I think, looking at the last previous few years, that would give the board a general sense of if they did levy them or impose them at 100%, 50%, 75%, what would that look like? I think that certainly comes into play with the decision making. When you're making a choice like this, I think you need to know the financial impacts for the district and, of course, the public.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. Dr. Paulson.
No, I was just going to say thank you, Mr. Bowles. I remember my first concern in the last meeting was the east side of Gainesville, and I think you get a clear presentation here. So I want to appreciate that. And I could have sworn it wasn't a recommendation, but it was figured out for 75% in that last meeting, if I remember correctly. So that's all I will say.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Paulson. Anyone else like to speak? All right, well, we greatly appreciate all the work that Mr. Bowles has done and the information that we have here. And we will discuss it further at a board meeting and make a decision on when and how we're going to do this. I think the county commission would be very receptive to our request, as they've been wanting this from us for a long time, and we're finally getting around to it. So thank you, everyone. And if there's no further comment, I will adjourn this meeting. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.